Dear followers, we continue our lecture. In this part we will talk about human and information after industrial revolution. We should pay attention that human civilization is an accumulated process. It is not really separated before and after industrial revolution, but we had this choice in order to facilitate the understanding of the courses. In the previous parts, we talked about the human as the heir of the information system. We talked about the development of information and information treatment. And we talked about the tools that facilitate the manipulation of data. We talked about writing system. We talked about numbers, about number systems, about algorithms. In this part, we will see that we developed during the last 2 centuries a lot of tools that enabled us to manipulate data automatically. This is the difference, main difference, between treatment of data before and after the industrial revolution. By the way, we can talk about the machine of Pascal, which was invented in 1642. The machine of Pascal was before the Industrial Revolution, but Pascal was thinking how can he make the algorithms executed by machines. So he invented this mechanical machine, to what we see to the left. He invented this machine to execute the addition and the subtraction. And it was very developed invention regarding this period. We go immediately, so we cannot talk about all the invention related to information treatment, but one of the most important invention related to the automatic treatment, it was the invention of Volta. It was the battery. In the 18th century, it was the first time that a human invented a tool to generate a continuous electrical current. We can say that we invented the industrial electricity. With this invention, we could later invent all the electrical tools. One of the most important electrical tools was the tool of Morse. Morse proposed in his invention to transmit data using electrical wires. So we see in the left, we see that we have a type of switch. It is a button. This button is connected with wires to another part. The other part, what we see to the right, it is, to simplify this device, it is merely a magnetic pen. So when we short press, what happens, this pen will design small point. Okay? So we have a type of pen connected to a magnetic, electrical magnetic, and when the current is switched on, the pen will touch the paper and the paper is turning, so we will make a small point. When we have a long press, what will happen? The paper is turning and the magnetic pen, the electrical magnetic pen, will touch the paper for longer period and we will draw a dash. It is very simple. We have point and dash. But what is important, we can have these wires as long as we need. So we can transmit signals by electrical wires. We should understand that in this period, before this period, we needed to transmit the information. We should to transfer papers. To do so, we should go ourselves. Human should travel from place to place to transfer data. But with this invention, human can communicate data using electrical wires. What happened? We should find a type of code to transfer all our letters that we use into points and dashes. So Morse invented also this code. A, for example, it is point dash. B, as you see, it is dash point point point. With such way, we could transfer the data all over the globe if the code is standard. If the sender, if the emitter and the receiver have the same code. It is a very short period. We can see that we invented the battery at 1900, 19th century, at the beginning of 19th century. Morse invented his code and his tool at 1932. And very shortly, at 1965, we had the first international organization. This is very important organization because it is a type of cooperation between all the states on the earth. At 1965, we had the organization to facilitate the interaction between all the club, all the people on the club. We had the International Telegraph Union. So during this period, we can communicate over the club. It is sure that not all the states was involved in this organization. They were only 20 states, but this organization was open for all the countries. Shorter, it is only 12 years after we invented the telephone. It is very short history with a lot of invention in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So with the Morse code and Morse invention, human information are transmitted as electrical signals all over the globe. What is important, we could connect the Morse machines with wires, but the goal was to communicate human data. The goal was not to communicate machines between machines. The goal is to communicate between humans. So the code of Morse was used as a media to communicate the data. Shortly after, in the beginning of the 20th century, there was the First War and the Second War. Unfortunately, this was not a good event for humanity, but it accelerated the many inventions related to the treatment of data. We can see that in Germany, we invented Z3 machine at 1941, which was one, we can consider it as the first real computer in the world. The most important machine in this period was IDVAC. Why? Because it adapted the John von Neumann principle. What is this? In this principle, what we can do, we can put data in the computer and we can register the data. Furthermore, we can add programs, so we can feed the machine with the algorithm, and also we can register the algorithm. This is very important invention. It is the heart of the computer of these days. So, if we will compare between the computer and between the traditional technique of data treatment, in the past we had data representation and transmission. We have words, but we had also something like letters. But up by the time we invented some code, it is the decimal code with a zero that enabled us to make algorithms to treat data. After the Industrial Revolution, we had some tools at the beginning to communicate data, to send data using machines. It was Morse Code, but by the time we had the computer, so the computer was able to execute algorithms. What was difficult, it was the communication between human and machine. How human can send data, what is the correct form of data that we can use. These days it is easy. The interface between human and the machine was developed, but at that time it was difficult to train, to know how we will insert the data in the machine and how we will insert the programs in the machine. With Morse code, the interface was this switch that we can use to make dot or to make dash. But with computers, we waited till almost 1955 to invent what we call high-level programming languages. What are these languages? Now you know, for example, C language or Pascal language or C# language or Java, etc. At this year, it was the beginning of these languages. They are simplified languages that we can understand the words, but they are oriented to the machine, not for human. So, for example, we can see some sentences. We can see some mathematic instruction, expression. We can see some English words like print, print x, then, if, etc. So they are simplified expression that we can understand, but we can send later to machine, and machine also can understand and can execute these commands. It does not mean that the machine understands the human language, but human can understand the instruction that the machine can execute. Later, one of the most important inventions was the simplification of the computer to resize it to adapt with the human. So, one of the most invention was the invention of Steve Jobs at 1976 with Apple 1, Apple 2, etc. What he called it home computer. In this computer, we can see that the size of the computer is small, and the screen, the monitor, and the keyboard were used. It could be used by a human. Then IBM invented similar device, the PC. It is a personal computer. IBM studied also the price of the machine. So the human, I think it was almost $2,000 at this time. After that, also Steve Jobs with Apple, they invented they gave us Lisa. It was the first computer that used the mouse and the graphics, what we call now Windows. All the Windows was used firstly at Lisa machine. What is important, even if the word computer means compute, it is related to calculation. But we could, with this computer, especially we talk about IBM PC, it came with a data storage. It was a floppy disk. We used this disk when I was young. We used this type of data storage. It was enough, the size of this diskette, we called it floppy disk, was 360 kilobyte. So this floppy could register 360,000 letters. For these days, for that period, it was very important tool that anyone almost who has $2,000 can use. So for the small organization, they could use these type of computers. Before, the computer was very expensive. It was at the first, with the first invention of computers, it was only the states who could buy this type of computers or make these computers works. At the beginning, it was only the states who can make the computers. After that, it was only the big companies. By the time it was the middle companies, and now with this invention, or even small companies can use this type of computers to treat data. What is amusing here, that we can see that the floppy disk contain data that are oriented for machine, but it was transported by human. It is amusing to know that we can make some data, but we transfer it by human. What is important, so what make the machine very famous, it is the facilities. So human can send the data, communicate. We need to communicate with the machine in two directions. The human can send data and information and control using keyboard, mouse, etc. And machine could send the answers, the reaction, using printer, using monitors, etc. So it is very important, this interaction. Nowadays, we don't pay attention. We think that when press, for example, in the keyboard, F button, that means the computer understands F. For the computer, it is not really F, it is a button that was pressed. And all the processing later should be done in order to interpret this press as if the letter F is pressed. During this period, there was no direct communication between machines and the environment. It was a human who interacted with the external environment, and he was the only port for the machine. So machine can interact with the human, and the human interact with the environment. What is important, that we start to use the machine not only to manipulate data, but also for storage of data. As I say, what was amusing, that we can see that the machine communicated using floppy disks, and floppy disks were communicated by human. It is very strange, because what we see before with Morse, even one century before the invention of the computer machine could communicate using Morse, if you can say, but now it was a human who make the machine. It was the connection between the machines.